Welcome back to the TAS tutorial. In this part, we're looking at Playaround, which is essentially fun stuff you can do during the downtime in your TAS. So there's a few situations where you might use Playaround. For example, if you're in an auto-scroller or a boss, which moves pretty slowly, if you're waiting for cycles in a game, or if you've got any normal gameplay that you're doing, really. So pretty much anywhere where there's downtime and you're waiting for something, you might want to do some play around. The reason being is when you're waiting for something, it can be quite boring and you want to make your TAS as entertaining as possible. So this is actually something you really should consider because a lot of the times when a TAS is accepted or rejected to TAS videos, it'll depend on the entertainment of the TAS. And if you can put some play around in your TAS, you'll have more of a chance of being accepted to TAS videos. The only thing I really want to stress is make sure you don't cause any extra lag by doing your play around. So if you're playing around in an auto scroller, make sure that it's just as fast as if you weren't doing your play around, because you can cause lag sometimes, which defeats the purpose. It's also worth mentioning, some TASs are entirely dedicated to play around, and these are called play around TASs. A classic example is Super Smash Bros. Has a really good play around TAS, or I've even done one for Banjo-Kazooie. Some other TASs have speed entertainment trade-offs, which pretty much means they're trading some time to be a bit more entertaining. So the game that we're looking at, Castle of Illusion, has a 1 frame speed entertainment trade-off where they get a jump during a cutscene. So it makes a jump sound where there shouldn't be a jump sound. It's kind of fun, but it does lose a frame. Another example of speed entertainment trade-off is red bar in Pokemon. Some old TASs didn't use red bar because it was an annoying sound, even though it was a bit quicker. So you can make your own decision with speed entertainment trade-offs. Having them doesn't disqualify you from being on the site, but use them to your own discretion wherever you see appropriate. But just make sure that if you're losing time, you're actually making it entertaining, not just losing time because you're losing time. Okay, and there are a few things that we can do to play around. This is by no means a complete list, but it's a few ideas that I've had. So messing with the physics is a big one in the game. So you might want to move your character back and forth really quickly. You might want to hold left and right, see if anything interesting happens. You might want to try and do 2 actions at the same time, see if something funky happens. Just lots of weird stuff you can do in a TAS context. The next thing is showing off game secrets. So we'll see a few examples of that, but anything you think is cool and worth showing off in the game, you could show. You could show off glitches, and another big one is synchronizing with the music, which I'm a huge fan of when people do that in TASs. And then there's a few other things you can do, like funny moments. For example, if you're imitating boss movement or something like that, it can be quite entertaining. But these are all things you can do to just make it so that you're not standing there waiting for something in a TAS. So our first example here is going to be from my Crash 3 TAS in the tiny boss fight. This is just an example of what some play around could look like where you're waiting around in a game. So generally you'll follow the boss's patterns, you'll show off some funky movement. Here I'm about to show off that if you bounce on lines you get a reward, so we'll get an apple for bouncing on 2 of those in a row. And following the boss patterns is always a lot of fun, just having a bit of fun with the bosses there. So we'll see another lion phase here. It's quite a long fight, this one. But I like ground pounding just to show a bit of danger. You would never ground pound in practice because you're unable to move for so long, but I'm actually safe. And this last phase is my favorite here because I finish him off with a belly flop there, which is lots of fun. So that's what a boss fight could look like, and you'll just notice there that there's no point where I'm really standing around waiting. It's all just making the most of that time for entertainment purposes. Now, play around isn't just limited to auto scrollers and boss fights. You can use it in normal levels. So take, for example, a game just like Mario, normally pretty straightforward, just running to the right. But this TAS by Happy Lee and Mars608 makes it a bit more interesting by doing just some fun stuff throughout the level. So you'll see they got the fireball, they're killing enemies, showing off all the secrets. I think we'll see a hidden vine in a second, a pipe clip. It's all going on. So Mario's a bit unique in that you have a frame rule in this game, meaning they can lose a frame or 2 here and there and still make the optimal time. So to my understanding in this TAS, what they've done is they've squeezed as much entertainment they can out of each frame rule. Yeah, so, but in a lot of games you don't have a frame rule, but you can still do similar stuff and just make it a bit more interesting with Playaround. One other thing that I really like to do with Playaround is syncing up with the music in the game, as we'll see in this clip here. So I'm shooting to keep time with the music there, but also moving back and forth with the character in time with the drum beats to make more of a complete package for syncing up. You'll find that a lot of TASs are also into music, so this is quite common, and in my opinion it doesn't really get old. I always love seeing a TAS sync up to the music where possible. It is kind of difficult to actually sync the TAS up to the music, and sometimes you can think you've got it, whereas you haven't got it. But if you use the piano roll on TAS Studio, it makes it a little bit nicer to do. One other thing you can do with Playaround is mess around with glitches while you're waiting. So this boss fight's normally quite boring with the crab. You have to just wait and throw the jar at it. But you can actually get stuck in this wall, which is a bit of fun. So there's not much I can do in the wall, except I can get further in and come out the other side there. So I had a lot of fun doing this boss fight. It was actually really difficult to get it because Mickey's quite low in air through the majority of this. And you'll find that I'm not actually surfacing for air, so it's quite scary. But you can get an air refill inside the wall somehow, so I thought I'd show that off as well. But as you can see, this boss fight would normally be really boring. You'd just be waiting to throw your barrel, doing a bit of music sync there while I'm waiting here. But it gets a bit more interesting when you play around with glitches. So it's always good to look for stuff, and what I've actually found in the past is glitches that I've found in boss fights while doing Playaround have actually been applicable to the rest of the game. Classic example is zigzagging and crash, which I found during Playaround in the tiny fight. So you might be wondering why I've shown you all this Playaround. The reason being, in the section we're up to on Castle of Illusion, we're up to an auto-scroller. So I thought now would be an appropriate time to talk about Playaround and how it's used in a TAS. And this will actually bring us to the end of our Castle of Illusion TAS, which is exciting. So I'm in this level, which is sort of the chocolate level auto-scroller. And if you have been following along up to this point, you want to be aiming for this screen to fade in at 5085. And this will be a really good exercise because everything leading up to here is pretty much just straight platforming. So if you can match this room or even beat me into this room, then that's a really good indication that you're on the right track with your TASing. But I will show what I've come up with for this level and to the end of the TAS, and then you can compare your final TAS time to mine, and hopefully you'll be able to shave off a few frames as well. So this Playaround is far from good, but it's a little example of what I put together. So you can see there's a lot of near-death stuff, a bit of physics going on there. Getting Mickey to walk backwards is always fun. Almost getting squashed here and then going down the slope at the end. So there's a bit to it, but it could have been a lot more interesting than this. If you watch the actual Castle of Illusion TAS that's published on TAS videos, you'll find that it's a lot more interesting than what I've just done there. So that's this level done, and then pretty much all there is left for practice mode is jumping up that ladder and going to Witchminster Bell. Then I've cleared her text box, and the last button that I pressed is here. At the end of a TAS, you want to truncate your movie. Otherwise, if you submit it with, let's say, a few more frames on the end, TAS Video's website will think that it's that long and not this long here. So I'm going to truncate it there and finish up. There we go. So that would be the process of finishing a TAS, and then you should hopefully be aiming to have yours truncated down to 7688 if you're following along. So that brings us to the end of the Castle of Illusion section of this TAS tutorial, and at this point, if you're following along with this TAS project, hopefully you've made your first completed TAS, even if it is just of a little practice mode of this game. So that's the majority of the structure behind what I've wanted to show, particularly around 2D TASing, but it is by no means everything that I'd want to show about TASing. So although this is the end of Castle of Illusion, it's not necessarily the end of this series. There's still a lot that we haven't talked about in TASing, and hopefully we'll explore that in the future.